West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
In news, in politics, in pop culture, all roads lead back to the Murdochs. But rarely does anyone take a step back and make the necessary connections involving this media empire. Maybe that's because the two men are actually rarely heard from. Father Rupert presides over all the Murdoch empire's media assets, from the Wall Street Journal to The Sun to Fox News, etc. One of his sons, Lachlan, runs Fox Corporation. That is the company that actually oversees Fox News. So they wield enormous power, but they almost never talk about it in public. They never come face to face with any form of accountability. They stay behind the scenes, and maybe that's by design. I mean, critics often call out the millionaires who star on Fox's shows, but the responsibility really rests with the billionaires, with the men in charge of this propaganda and profit machine. And that raises a fundamental question. Should any single family have this much power? Especially this family? Well, we would ask, if we could ask. But like I said, the Murdochs usually lay low. However, they do occasionally speak to Wall Street analysts, trying to impress investors. And that's how Lachlan raised eyebrows the other day. When he talked about the Trump years and now the Biden years, he said MSNBC was the biggest beneficiary of the Trump years. And then he said that's what Fox is going to be in the Biden years.
They are in sort of loyal opposition, right? They called out the president when he needed to be called out. That's what our job is now, with the Biden administration, and you'll see our ratings, really improve from here, and we'll do so for at least the next 4 years.
He's trying to tell investors, don't worry about our relatively weak ratings. We are coming back. Our ratings are coming back. The audience is coming back. And on one level, he's just stating the obvious, admitting Fox is anti-Democrat, saying the network is awakening from its Trump-era slumber, and calling out President Biden. But what about the news side anchors that Fox always touts? Remember the slogan, fair and balanced, going back decades? Are these news anchors part of the opposition too? Of course, Fox is cutting back on actual news coverage, reducing its reporter ranks, and tripling down on fact-free opinion on behalf of the GOP. The programming now is all about fights, not facts. And that brings me back to Rupert, age 89. He is turning 90 on Thursday. Think about what he's built. Think about his legacy. He has a big extended family, generations of kids and grandkids that are a whole lot more liberal than he is. All roads may lead to them someday. This week, 2 news outlets published big news stories about the future of the empire. The Financial Times was first. It raised questions about whether Lachlan really wants to keep running Fox. He's into doing digital deals, but, quote, the 49-year-old is less interested in the daily grind of running Fox and has grown weary of the relentless controversies surrounding Fox News. Interesting. So, will they someday sell the rest of Fox? Will some Trump-aligned backer try to buy Fox News? Will Rupert recombine his TV and print assets? These questions matter because the news you consume is so impacted and sometimes so distorted by one family. A brand new story in The Economist frames it this way. Rupert prepares to hand over his media empire. So, maybe it's not a very happy 90th birthday for the succession-style patriarch. Joining me with reporting and analysis is Sarah Ellison, a staff writer at The Washington Post, Oliver Darcy, CNN's senior media reporter, and former Fox News reporter Diana Falzone, now a contributing reporter at The Daily Beast. Full disclosure here, Falzone filed a discrimination lawsuit against Fox in 2017. She settled and left the company in 2018. So, Diana, you've been on the inside at Fox. How influential are Rupert and Lachlan? Do you feel like this is a company, that profits off Fox News but doesn't actually steer the ship? Because I often hear people say there's a lack of leadership at Fox News.
I have been covering Fox News as a journalist now for several months, and what I'm hearing from Fox News insiders say is that Fox News' CEO, Suzanne Scott, is little more than a figurehead, that Rupert Murdoch and Lachlan are steering the ship, and that Suzanne Scott is, quote-unquote, a good soldier to the Murdochs. She listens to what they say. She executes their orders, just as she did, quote-unquote, for Roger Ailes.
So that suggests that they are very important, that they are not, ignoring what's going on there. But isn't it true that Rupert and Lachlan give the host so much autonomy, and that's why you see all this propaganda and these conspiracy theories in prime time?
There is with opinion programming, but when it comes to their fact-based journalism, we've seen recently in January what was called an ideological purge of fact-based journalism by staffers inside of Fox News on the digital side. So they feel as though they're being very controlled and that there's been a larger pundit to go more into right-wing opinion programming.
Interesting. All right, let's listen to more of what Lachlan Murdoch said to investors the other day. He was talking about the brand going forward and who Fox represents. Watch.
We very much focus on the center right. We think that's where America is. 75 million people voted for a Republican president. Sometimes in spite of his his personality at times, and so they believe in those politics and they feel strongly about those political and policy positions, and that's what we represent.
Okay, so no more fair and balanced, right? He's just freely admitting what Fox is. It is for the Republican Party. It's for Republican voters. Maybe, Oliver, this is a good thing to just give up the game.
To some extent, it was refreshing, right, Brian? Because people like us have been covering the network for so long and pointing out that it is the opposition, the anti-democratic network, and the network has insisted that it has a, quote-unquote fair and balanced news division. So hearing Lachlan come out and say, we are the opposition, this is our role in the Biden years, to some extent was refreshing.
It's just so head-spinning because for 4 years they were in this slumber. I thought it was really striking how NBC reacted to Lachlan mentioning MSNBC. Right? So he said MSNBC was the opposition, now it's our turn. Here's what NBC said in response. They said, our role and the role of any legitimate news organization, whether it includes an opinion section or not, is to hold power to account regardless of party. So basically NBC was like, get our name out of your mouth. Do not compare us to you. We are not the same as you. Sarah, you've been able to talk with Rupert Murdoch recently. I think what do? You just email him questions and he writes back. He doesn't go around PR. He doesn't decline interview requests the way he does with everybody else, right? So you know what's been on his mind. What can you share with us?
Well, I would say that it's, I email him and he emails back. I haven't spoken to him. But I think that he's both at once more involved and a little bit removed from this. He does like for his hosts to, have some leeway, but for his entire career, Rupert Murdoch has taken the conversation in a direction that punctures the elites, the way he thinks about it, punctures the elites, and it scandalizes people, and he makes a lot of money doing that, and this is really no different. Yeah.
Do you have an impression of where he sees the business going? I know he's not going to reveal his secrets to you about that, but looking at the tea leaves, the company moving further to the right, these stories about Lachlan maybe not wanting to stay involved. We know that the more liberal son, James, is on the sidelines, waiting in his turn. He hopes to take over someday in the event of Rupert's death. He hopes to take over and in his view, remove the outrageous programming on Fox News. Is that possible, or is that a liberal fantasy, Sarah?
Well, we're going to see a lot of things. This has been something that people inside Fox have been watching for a long time. No one loves the news business more than Rupert Murdoch. None of his children. And so regardless of what happens, what Rupert's succession drama, which everyone's been watching for decades, is going to bring is a moment of reckoning for Fox. And whether it's Lachlan, whether it's James, whether it's someone else, it's going to bring big changes to that network. And we're just going to have to see how that shakes out.
Right. Nobody knows when or how that could happen. It's just something on the horizon. We don't know how distant it is. But it's notable these news stories are all pointing toward some change to the empire.
It is Monday, the 8th of March of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunnar the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because it's been a weekend, and we make a really lovely hash on Mondays because of the weekend. Okay, speaking of which, how was your weekend? We had a fairly nice one. My sister celebrates her official birthday today. She's 65. Welcome to the club, sis. And but today, since she's a nurse and running the respiratory department at the major hospital here in the Rogue Valley, she's at work celebrating her birthday there, which is basically working. Stop it, you're supposed to be retired. Well, happy birthday, sis. And so yeah, she does God's work, and she's an angel. That's basically how it works. So there you go. Well, there's a bit of a kerfuffle that's been occurring here in, the Jackson County, Josephine County area, which includes Medford, Ashland, and then Josephine County is Grants Pass. A well-known sundown town from back in the day. Some people wonder if it still is. Some people do. Especially if you're, of color walking at night. Be careful. Might not be good for you. So, because I guess now the problem now is that trans athletes, busloads of trans athletes are going to be come and invading our schools, apparently, is now the big problem. So a local journalist who had written for the Rogue River paper, who was run out of town a while ago for essentially just basically noting that Southern Oregon has been a hotbed for racist, white supremacists, Nazis, and secessionists. And I got to tell you, when they're among themselves, they speak glowingly about all those attributes. But when it was spoken about in a derisive manner, obviously that guy was a bully. And he got run out of town for being a bully. He's the racist. Well, this journalist reported on the town of Talent. They have a special education teacher there who refuses to work with any kids who might identify as trans. And for that, he's a bully. And anybody who supports trans rights are bullies. Yeah, I got you. So this particular journalist, Brad Smith, was then exposed on a YouTube video with a guy. He's talking about Brad Smith being a bully. And the guy's doing this podcast, and he looks to me, I got to tell you, it looks like a Nazi Jungen, a Trumpenjungen. But he's doing a podcast, and Room Rater would probably rate the room as, it's highly assaultive. Look at all the rifles. There was like a 50 caliber. There was all the regular AK-47s. I think there was an Uzi there. It was insane. It looked like he was inside a gun safe. One of the walk-in ones. And that's where he did his podcast, talking about how much of a bully this journalist was for reporting the news. But not only that, it was all leftist bullying. And they're going to expose the leftist bullies in this area. Yeah. Well, the only ones worried about leftists are Nazis, okay? But I got to tell you, Nazis hate when you say that to them. Every single time. And I keep telling them we're not bullies, we're just playing the circle game. And then they don't know where to go. What? So, we got that around here. We had some high school students caught in their class senior picture day flashing the Pepe sign, the white nationalist symbol. And the parents around here and everybody else said, no, they're just playing the circle game. No, they're not. They're flashing the Pepe sign, and they know exactly what it is, and so do you. And there's still a few flying the Trump flag, and they have their Trump rallies in Grants Pass, a well-known sundown town, by the way, from back in the day. Some people still think it is. Yeah. So on Saturday, they had their ISIS caravan again. Oh, it was supposed to be touted publicly as an appreciation of the flag. You know what? You don't get the United States flag, you traitor. You can't just appropriate the flag. How dare you? You got your goddamn Nazi or Dixie swastika. You even have the regular Nazi swastika. You fly them both. Stick to that. Leave the stars and stripes alone. You have you can't have it. All right? So, but I'm not going to tell them, in a vociferous way because they're armed. And you know what we say about armed people? They get to decide what polite conversation is, don't they? All right. Well, we meaning the Democratic members of our established government here, passed the stimulus bill. Yes, $1.9 trillion. Notice how they really just hate that number because it's exactly what it was for the tax break. But they're complaining that, there's all sorts of stuff in this bill that has nothing to do with the virus. Well, what did your tax break have to do with anything helping America? Every single time you issued a tax break to the top, 600 some odd people in America, get a tax break. Everybody else gets to suffer. Well, apparently, according to the repugs, their tax breaks achieved exactly what they wanted, and that's basically to starve government, make it so it doesn't work, and then they can point at it and say, look, government doesn't work, so forget it. And what do they have to replace it? Yeah, you think it's chaos? I think it's selling out to the highest bidder, and right now that's Vlad. Because the repugs are bottom feeders. It doesn't take much to turn them against America. It doesn't. Just a few $1,000. That's all it takes. And yet, they're allowed to not only hold office, but vote. Maybe we should prevent people who don't know how to season chicken. And there's a whole demographic that do that. Then they're not allowed to vote. Okay, if they want voter suppression, we can give it to them. But as soon as we start suppressing the vote, trust me, there will be a voting rights amendment. And it will be entrenched in stone. Entrenched? Well, you know what I mean. Okay, well, we have a whole curated show here. We could just keep going on like we usually do, but we might just go ahead and dive into what we have curated for you today. At the top, of course, that was Steltner breaking it down about how Murdochs are everywhere, and should one family hold all that power? Well, I don't know. Talk to the Windsors. Yeah, they know. And I'll just say one thing about the Windsors, and a few people saw it on Twitter, and that is that if I was Meghan Markle, I wouldn't be driving through a Paris tunnel anytime soon. There's some only bad things can happen there. On the rest of the menu, the Trump administration relocated the USDA from D.C. to Kansas City to curtail research and stifle farmer confidence because they want to make sure government doesn't work. And if government works, that's the worst thing that could ever be, and they got to make sure it can't. Republican governors are stepping up wolf kills before the Biden administration cracks down on it. Yeah, kill as many as possible. Look what they did with those federal guys on death row. Step it up. And the Georgia prosecutor probing Trump's election interference has hired a leading racketeering attorney. All right. After the break, we then move to the chef's table where the U.S. and South Korea have agreed on a new cost-sharing deal for troops stationed there as a bulwark against North Korean intransigence. And a longtime human rights organization in Russia announced it is disbanding because of the country's draconian foreign agents law. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from the chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and send us, well, the equivalent of what you used to spend on an espresso-type coffee drink. Remember those days? Well, if you could afford to do that, only if you can, and you could send that amount of money to us once a month, we pool that money with what we have also and what others have, contributed, and we pay our bills. And surprisingly, when you pay your bills in this society, generally they allow you to fly under the radar, and that's what we do. And we've been doing it for 10 years, so we're well experienced. Actually, the official 10th year anniversary comes up in just a couple of days. Yeah, and we've been able to sustain ourselves because of your generosity, and we want to thank you, and thank you, and thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and Tom takes care of a lot more, too. We're going to have a few recorded announcements announcing our 10th year anniversary. Isn't that fun? Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I do post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, so you can check things out there, but I post that show notes and links diary on Twitter about 10 minutes before showtime, and also other social media platforms if you have to catch them there. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. And wherever fine podcasts can be found mixed in with all the rest of us. There's a few fine ones out there, and then there's the rest of us. But we muddle along. And now this podcast hasn't been going for 10 years, but quite a while now. There was another iteration. I don't know if those folks remember, but there was another iteration of the show. But we're something else now, aren't we? Yeah, I'll say we're something else. Speaking of something else, why don't we get into something else? And that would be the curated part of the show. And this offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is by Roxana Hegeman. And she works at the Associated Press. Now, more than a year after 2 U.S. Department of Agriculture research agencies were moved from the nation's capital to Kansas City, Missouri, forcing a mass exodus of employees who couldn't or did not want to move halfway across the country. They remain critically understaffed, and some farmers are less confident in the work they produce. Well, that's a feature, not a bug. Remember? Bannon said that the whole purpose of the Trump administration was to deconstruct the administrative state. Yeah, sounds Teutonic, huh? Sounds like something a mob government might come up with. Who write their contracts in Cyrillic? Maybe. Now, the decision to move the Economic Research Service and the National Institute of Food and Agriculture in September of 2019 was pitched as putting them closer to farmers in the nation's breadbasket, though much of their work involves advising members of Congress back in Washington. After the relocation was announced, Trump's chief of staff at the time, Mick Mulvaney, joked that moving the jobs to Kansas City was also a wonderful way to streamline government. You know, shrink it to the size where you can drown it in a bathtub or push it out of a 5-story window conveniently. Tom Vislak inherited a demoralized workforce at the two agencies when he took over as Secretary of Ag under President Joe Biden. God, it's great to call the president, isn't it? We were not really allowed to, because of the Netroots radio style manual quickly recognized that we were not going to use the P word attributed to Trump. And we still won't. Well, with 235 vacancies between them, the 235 vacancies, the agencies continued to hire during the pandemic and administration change, but they are putting out work that is smaller in scope and less frequent, causing some farmers to look elsewhere for data that they rely on to run their operations. Among them is Vance Emke, who said that since the USDA relocations occurred, he has been paying a lot more attention to private market analysis and what private grain companies are doing. The information feeds his decisions on everything from whether to buy more land or a new tractor or whether to build more grain bins. Here, when we need really good, hard information, you are really starting to question groups like the USDA, which before had a sterling reputation. But out in the country, people are worried about how good the information is now because those groups are operating at half capacity, he noted. You know, out in real America, where's the New York Times sitting down in a diner talking to this guy? Because they're not. Farmers rely on the research to make decisions on a wide range of topics, from rural community planning to farming with climate change and volatile weather conditions, said Aaron Lehman, a farmer who is president of the Iowa Farmers Union. The ERS examines issues including the rural economy, international trade, food safety, and programs that provide assistance to poor Americans. NEFA, meanwhile, provides grants for agricultural research and other farm services. It has gone in the wrong direction in general terms of accuracy now, said Adrian Polanski, a farmer and former executive director of the USDA's Farm Service Agency office in Kansas during the Obama administration. Whether that was for sure based on that transition or whether it was the leadership in the department in terms of what the political goals may have been, I'm not exactly sure. But it seems like there was less reliability. Well, that's being diplomatic. Matt Herrick, a USDA spokesman, said in an email that he could not speak to the volume and variety of ERS reports and research under the Trump administration. However, he said, when you lose more than half of your expert workforce, there is bound to be a noticeable effect. When former Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue toured the new Kansas City headquarters in November of 2019, he predicted the agencies would be fully staffed by the first quarter of 2020. Well, that didn't happen. In October of 2016, before Trump's first year in office, the agency had 318 permanent employees. But by October of 2019, just a month after the move, the workforce at the labs had shrunk to 164. And as of late January of 2021, it had 219 employees, including 67 still based in Washington, D.C. Now, the same trend played out at the other lab, which had 320 employees in October 2016. By October of 2019, it was down to 112 workers, though it rebounded somewhat to 218 by January, this last January, including 16 employees based in D.C. Best I can tell, they were putting out information that Trump really did not like hearing, like global climate change and things like that, Farmer Emke said. And here in the U.S., what we do with groups like that, well, we can't send them to Siberia, so we send them to Kansas City. Matthew Brown and Iris Samuels of the AP bring us this next offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. Payments for dead wolves, unlimited hunting of the animals, shooting wolves from the air. Wolf hunting policies in some states are taking an aggressive turn as Republican lawmakers and conservative hunting groups push to curb their numbers and propose tactics shunned by many wildlife managers. In Montana, lawmakers are advancing measures to allow shooting wolves at night and payments to hunters reminiscent of bounties that widely exterminated the species last century. Idaho legislation would allow hunters to shoot them from motorized parachutes, ATVs, or snowmobiles year-round with no limits in most areas. And in Wisconsin, just weeks after Trump's administration lifted protections for wolves in the Great Lakes region, hunters using hounds and trappers blew past the state's harvest goal and killed almost twice as many as planned. The timing of Wisconsin's hunt was bumped up following a lawsuit that raised concerns that President Joe Biden's administration would intervene to restore gray wolf protections. The group behind the suit has close links to Republican political circles, including influential donors to the Koch brothers and notable Trump loyalists. Chris Kobach, a former U.S. Senate candidate from Kansas, we all know who he is, and they're calling this guy a rock star, but he is a gun rights advocate, and that's Ted Nugent. We like to call him a pedophile, but, that's us. Antipathy toward wolves for killing livestock and big game dates to early European settlement of the American West in the 1800s and flared up again after wolf populations rebounded under federal protection. Well, that was the whole idea. What's emerging now is different, an increasingly politicized campaign to drive down wolf numbers, sometimes using methods anathema to North American hunting traditions, according to former wildlife officials and advocates, because it's kicking the libs. Oh, you want to be humane? You want to have some way of just keeping the population together with science? Well, I guess that means we're socialists, isn't it? Now, hanging in the balance is a decades-long initiative that brought back thousands of wolves in the Rocky Mountains, the Pacific Northwest, and Great Lakes regions. Considered among scientists and environmentalists a major conservation success, the predator's return remains a sore point for ranchers, whose livestock are sometimes attacked by wolves, and hunters who consider wolf pack competition in the pursuit of elk, deer, and other big game that they can put as a trophy up on their mantles. In Montana and Idaho, wolf numbers exploded after the reintroduction from Canada in the 1990s. Federal protections were lifted a decade ago, and the states have been holding annual hunts since. And wildlife officials cite stable population levels as evidence of responsible wolf management. That's not satisfied hunting and livestock groups and their Republican allies and those legislators who contend 1,500 wolves in Idaho and 1,200 in Montana are damaging the livelihoods of big game outfitters and cattle and sheep producers. Oh my God! busloads of Antifa wolves coming into our communities. Of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The district attorney investigating whether Trump illegally interfered with Georgia's 2020 election has hired an outside lawyer who is a national authority on racketeering, a source familiar with the matter told Reuters. Fulton County DA Fannie Willis has enlisted the help of Atlanta lawyer John Floyd, who wrote a national guide on prosecuting state racketeering cases. Floyd was hired recently to provide help as needed on matters involving racketeering, including the Trump investigation and other cases, said the source, who has direct knowledge of the situation. The move bolsters the team investigating Trump, as Willis prepares to issue subpoenas for evidence on whether Trump and his allies broke the law in their campaign to pressure state officials to reverse his Georgia election loss. Willis has said that her office would examine potential charges, including solicitation of election fraud, the making of false statements to state and local governmental bodies, conspiracy, racketeering, among other possible violations. A representative for Trump did not respond to requests for comment. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Black produced, Panther approved. I am calling it. We are experiencing an outpouring of black films the likes of which we have not seen before. Screw the slick repackagings of stereotypes pitched to black people and comforting to whites. We're talking about movies starring black people, about black people, made by black people. And all it took was white and black people making a whole hell of a lot of money. What did Ryan Coogler do with his Black Panther money? He formed Proximity Media, his own production company. What did Charles D. King do with the money he made working as a partner for talent agency Jallant WME? He formed Macro, keep an eye on them, his own production company, quote, with a vision of empowering and supporting people of color and diverse storytellers. Because of these producers, director Shaka King was able to make Judas and the Black Messiah, a film about slain Chicago Black Panther leader Fred Hampton, who was surveilled and assassinated by the Chicago PD and the FBI. Not only that, King made the film with Daniel Kaluuya from Black Panther and Get Out, Lakeith Stanfield from Knives Out and Sorry to Bother You, and Dominique Fishback from The Deuce and Project Power. Shaka King started the project 10 years ago, and at first he imagined a sweeping epic covering the whole history of the Black Panthers, but that topic was too much. So King refocused to tell Hampton's story through the eyes of the FBI's infiltrator and informant, Bill O'Neill. This choice means that our lead character and guide through this world is the Judas. And though the movie doesn't demonize O'Neill, it's not like it redeems him. So yes, you get Fred Hampton, but your first and last moments in the film are with his assassins and their lackey. It's an interesting approach, but King's approach works. Judas and the Black Messiah is a tight little story with beautiful visuals and subtly powerful acting. Plus, Hampton's widow and son consulted on it. Yeah, that's what the right black money behind you gets you. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Let's say you have a dog, or maybe you're watching a friend's pup. You have a treat in your hand, so you have the dog's attention. Then you put the treat into a doggy-proof box and let them figure it out. What do you think the dog will do? If you're a dog owner, you probably know. Spike or Spot or Miss Fluffy will probably try in vain for a while. But soon they'll probably turn back to you with those puppy dog eyes, with a look that's both hurt, why would you make it so hard for them after all, and pleading. That, it turns out, is a sophisticated cognitive phenomenon called referential communication. It's an attempt to shift the human's attention towards the problem. And dogs, as it turns out, aren't the only species who can do this. In 2003, a Hungarian biologist named Adam Miklósi tested this ability with an experiment. He gathered a handful of dogs and a group of wolves. Both groups of canines had been hand-raised from birth by people in much the same way. He put a piece of food inside of that doggy-proof box. The wolves kept trying and failing to get the food inside, and we already know what the dogs did. Alan McElligott, an animal cognition researcher at the City University of Hong Kong, wanted to push this test further. He wanted to move beyond dogs versus wolves.
The discussions of those papers and the discussion in the press is all about them being domesticated closely by humans.
He thinks that there's more to the story. What if animals don't need to be domesticated, but instead simply need to be socialized? Maybe it's not that dogs are especially social, but instead that wolves are just especially stubborn.
So we came along in 2016 and did the work on goats and showed that actually it's probably a general domestic animal thing. It's nothing to do with being domesticated as a companion animal.
In a new study, he's gone even further. Enter kangaroos.
And kangaroos generally haven't been used for any of that sort of research. I think most people, when I emailed them and suggested, this problem-solving task with with kangaroos, they thought I was kind of a bit mad or some really eccentric scientist.
McElligott rounded up a group of marsupials from 3 different zoos and sanctuaries. In all, he tested 3 different species: Kangaroo Island kangaroos, eastern gray kangaroos, and red kangaroos. Of 11 animals tested, 10 of them passed, turning their gaze back to McElligott. And of the 10 who turned to look at him, 9 kangaroos actively shifted their gaze between the box and the human. The results were published in December in the journal Biology Letters.
This domestication hypothesis for all these behaviors, we've over-relied on it. And I'm not saying that, kangaroos are just as good as dogs or anything like that. But I'm saying the cognitive capabilities of wild animals that are habituated to humans have probably been underestimated.
McElligott says that it's not enough to study domesticates and their wild counterparts like dogs and wolves. That's why he decided to try kangaroos, which were never domesticated.
You can't deduce the effects of domestication on animal behavior, animal cognition by only studying domesticated animals. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it's important. So you need to see what the other ones are capable of doing if they're used to being around people.
McElligott says that the pouched marsupials offer up a whole new set of possibilities for understanding the evolution of social cognition. And he's now turned his attention to yet another unexpected species, the Asian water buffalo. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
The proposed United States Citizenship Act of 2021, introduced in the House and Senate in February, would create a path to citizenship for most of the 11 million people living in the United States who don't have documents.
Soy Javier Luengo Garrido, organizador de la ACLU de Massachusetts, y este es el Minuto de Libertades Civiles con el abogado de ACLU, Bill Newman.
The proposed process would not be a simple or guaranteed one, and for most people it would take 8 years. An individual would apply for temporary legal status, which would require passing a criminal and national security check and proof that they've paid all their taxes. After that, they'd have to live and work in the country for 5 years, after which, if all is in order, they could apply for a green card. Then, after 3 more years, if they pass additional background checks, demonstrate proficiency in English and U.S. civics, they could apply for citizenship. Dreamers, those here under temporary protective status, and certain farm workers could apply for a green card without waiting the 5 years, although all the other requirements would apply. There is another exception. Long-term residents recently deported could also apply and might be granted an exception for family unity and other humanitarian reasons. There are many important parts of this proposed legislation, but as the debate on the bill begins, could we please start with an agreement on the need to pass this core provision of a path to citizenship?
El Minuto de Libertades Civiles es posible gracias a ACLU, porque la libertad no puede defenderse a sí misma.
After looking into one of their main issues, I have to agree with Republicans. Our elections are being rigged. Anyone who takes an honest look can see that the electoral process is being stolen in broad daylight by Republican lawmakers. In state after state, GOP governors and legislators are on a rampage to rig the system so you can't vote. By you, I mean you African Americans, Latinx voters, Asian Americans, indigenous peoples, and practically all other non-white citizens. Also, you seniors, union members, poor people, students, immigrant families, and others with a tendency to vote for Democrats. Fraudulently shouting fraud, GOP officials insist that they must steal your democratic right to vote in order to protect the sanctity of the vote. They're actually confessing their own embarrassing weakness and political ineptitude by admitting we can't win. Their lineup of squirrely, increasingly kooky candidates and their anti-people corporate-serving agenda have no ability to draw majority support, so their only hope to be elected is to jerry-rig America's democratic process with barriers, locks, bans, etc., to shut millions of citizens out of their polling places. Their 7 million vote defeat in last year's presidential race has spooked the Republican minority into a stampede of voter suppression initiatives this year. The Brennan Center for Justice, which tracks such maneuvers, reports that at least 253 bills have been introduced in 43 states to further obstruct Americans from casting ballots. This is Jim Hightower saying, this is pathetic, disgraceful political thuggery. Not only stealing people's birthright, but stealing democracy from America itself. To help reject their shameful corruption of elections, go to commoncause.org. commoncause.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor. All for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2007. That was the day 7,000 workers at Northrop Grumman, a shipyard company in Pascagoula, Mississippi, went out on strike. Grumman is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. The workers were members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 733, and the Pascagoula Metal Trades Council. They were still reeling from the ravages of Hurricane Katrina just 2 years earlier. The hurricane had devastated the Mississippi Gulf Coast and sent prices for housing skyrocketing. But while workers suffered, Katrina brought $3 billion in federal contracts to Northrop Grumman to repair hurricane damage. Despite this, Grumman proposed a 4-year contract for the workers with no raises and increased health care costs. For many workers, this did not sit well. They knew the company had received massive government contracts, but still was not willing to treat workers fairly at the bargaining table. The union members rejected the offer and voted to strike. The company came back with a proposal offering small raises, which did not keep pace with the cost of living. The strike was called. For 4 weeks, workers marched and manned the picket lines. During the strike, the company cut off the workers' health care coverage. The company then offered slightly higher wages and reduced the increases to health care coverage. Although the proposal was not enough to keep up with the soaring local cost of living, union members voted to end the strike and accept the offer.
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God is going to trouble these waters.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Wade in the water.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook of Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 33 degrees Fahrenheit. Looks like we're going to be a bit cooler even today. We'll be lucky if we get past the mid-40s. Partly cloudy skies during the morning, giving way to a few showers late. Thunder is possible, and the winds will be out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it a little less than, a quarter of an inch of rain. And then a mix of light rain and snow late tonight. Lows will be in the low 30s, and winds will be light and variable. Then cloudy early tomorrow, with highs around 50, showers for the afternoon, and winds will be out of the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and bringing with it possibly something less than a quarter inch of rain. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon. Now, these are not updated totals from the weekend, but late Friday, we rose to 8,543 cases, and we also increased our deceased to 118. And they're talking about opening restaurants and schools while we're increasing infections and deaths. Well, I guess business wants to do some business on us now, don't they? Pollen is rated as none outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index in the region is good at 26 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate, though it's ticked down from its Friday high of 4, but now it's still in the moderate range at 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 49 and partly cloudy, and mostly racist. Paris is 47 and sunny. Don't be driving any tunnels in Paris, Megan. Don't do it. Rome is 53 and partly cloudy. We just like the Spanish Steps. That's all we're going to say about Rome. Kyiv is 31 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 51 and clear. Hong Kong is 63 and partly cloudy with only a remnant of democracy. Tokyo is 45 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 72 and clear. San Francisco, California is 48 and mostly cloudy. And New York is 32 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. First amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes our way by the Associated Press, written by Robert Burns and Matthew Lee. The U.S. and South Korea have reached agreement in principle on a new arrangement for sharing the cost of the American troop presence there, which is intended as a bulwark against the threat of North Korean aggression. The State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs said yesterday, Sunday, the deal includes a negotiated increase in Seoul's share of the cost, but it provided no details. The Bureau said that the agreement, if finalized, would reaffirm the U.S.-South Korean treaty alliance as the linchpin of peace, security, and prosperity for Northeast Asia. Trump wasn't able to get an increase in costs, but Joe did.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous staff at the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. A longtime human rights organization in Russia announced it is disbanding because of pressure from the country's foreign agents law. The law requires organizations and individuals involved in vaguely defined political activity and who receive assistance from abroad to register as foreign agents. It's seen as an attempt to discredit activists because of the pejorative connotation that the term foreign agent carries for many Russians. The Organization for Human Rights said in a statement it was disbanding, citing the inclusion of its leader, Lev Ponomarev, on the Justice Ministry's list of foreign agents. It also said the law could subject its members to fines and imprisonment. Ponomarev, a veteran human rights activist, founded the organization in 1997. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.